Welcome back to Flute Fundamentals. I am Chelsea Tanner. I am a flutist and a mindset coach for musicians. And today we're talking about the angle of your air, what it affects, how to change it, and why you should know about the fundamental principles of it.
Hi everyone, brief pause from Chelsea editing this later. I had recorded all of the flute audio on a separate microphone. I then exported it from GarageBand, and I didn't realize I had done that with the metronome on, just didn't check. So all of the good recordings of the flute playing in this video have a metronome on top of them. So I decided to go with the little mic audio, which has a little bit of a low buzz or hum. So bear with me in this one. The next video is going to be just perfect and awesome, but this one we're still in progress. So I appreciate you and enjoy the video.
I break down things in a very simple and tangible way, really thinking from first principles about every single thing that has to do with flute playing. So let's get started. The angle of your air, meaning the angle you direct your air to catch the edge of the embouchure hole here, which is your target, that center of the outer edge, that is going to affect a few different things. The first thing is it's going to affect the speed of the air, which is going to affect the pitch. It's also going to affect the timbre or tone color that you get in any dynamic that you play. Sometimes we apply more air to the same register, hoping that it'll just work all the same. And a lot of times we're like, oh, why can't I get my high and soft notes to be as beautiful as my high and loud notes? Or my low louds are really juicy and big, but my soft low register actually sounds a little fuzzy. Why is that? The angle of the air also affects the pitch. So if we're running out of air, we need to angle our air a certain way. If we are playing really loud using a lot of air, then we need to angle it a certain way as well. We want to keep that pitch really steady and in tune. And to do that, we need to know the fundamental principles going on here. Let's talk about angles. We are able to change the angle of our air using our bottom lip. Now, we want to either push our bottom lip forward to cover more of the embouchure hole or less of the embouchure hole. This is why I always say to have your edge of the flute embouchure hole start where your lip starts and to have it snuggled in the chin instead of on the lip. Because if you have your lip plate on the lip, it's much less flexible to move forward and back. It's much easier if you have it just a little bit lower under the lip. You can find a little bit more about that in my first episode called How to Make a Sound on the Flute. It's one of those fundamental principles. This flexibility of the bottom lip allows you to cover more or less of it by aiming up or down. So you've probably heard people say, oh, for high notes, aim up, right? Aim your airstream up. For low notes, aim your airstream down. Now, why is this? Well, if we take our hand in front of our face and we blow up to the top of our hand, our bottom lip is moving forward. If we blow all the way down to the bottom, our bottom lip has moved back. This just aids in having the speed of air that we really want. So for high notes, we aim up, we cover more of the embouchure hole, we create more pressure going into the instrument, we get faster air. And aiming down we do as well. Slower air, larger opening here. You get the idea. That is much like the garden hose analogy, which I did in episode 2. So if you want a deep dive on how that works, you can go ahead and check out that episode. And while we're at it, if you would like a comprehensive guide on how I think about tone quality, I have a link to my ebook in the description. Now I want to address something. I personally, as a flute teacher, never teach to move the jaw forward. If we hinged the jaw forward, it can create tension here, and I know too many musicians with TMJ. I think that we can pucker forward with our bottom lip enough to move that airstream and angle up or down as need be. So I don't personally teach moving the jaw. I know some people do, and everyone has a different bite. I used to have more of an underbite before I got braces. That's going to affect the angle of my air at baseline. So really just experiment with yourself, but remember, if you're feeling strain and pain in your jaw, stop. Make sure that it is comfortable. You can really injure yourself if you have a repetitive motion that causes strain, and you do that for many hours a day. So, for example, the angle of the air. Let's take Afternoon of a Fawn. We start on this C sharp in the staff. Now, this excerpt is notorious for tone color. We have a C sharp, it's pretty transparent, but we still want a beautiful sound on it. We need to play very soft, and we want to make sure there isn't a lot of edge in the sound. This is controlled by the angle. So if I want to play a C sharp in the staff, quite soft, very specific, I'm going to aim my angle a little bit more up and across. If I were to play this louder and not change the angle, it would sound something like this. It doesn't seem centered. It's not hitting a sweet spot. Now if I aim down with my air, maybe to the bottom of the riser, of course, that would be wildly inappropriate to do in context, but you get the idea. So we need very specific angles for very specific tone colors and dynamics. Now, if I'm aiming to the bottom of the chimney or the riser here, then I get that sort of edge to the sound a little bit more. It sounds a bit more like a clarinet and a little bit less like blowing over a Coke bottle. Now I'm going to try it again, getting a little bit closer to the camera to see if you can see a difference in the angle. Playing it that loud almost seems like illegal. Okay. So I hope you could hear the difference there and maybe even see just a little bit of what was required here. Now let's take a third octave example. The excerpt from Brahms 1. So this very free-flowing, loud, big sound starting on a high E or an E in the third octave. What we want here is this huge sound. We want to aim a little bit lower because we want the pitch to be a bit lower, and we want to cover a bit less of the embouchure hole because we're using so much air we need to accommodate for it. Okay, so for example, let me show you what it would sound like if I played the flute solo from Brahms 1 loud, as it should be. And now if I were to not change my angle and play it really soft, maybe the next few notes would come out, but it's not specific enough to keep that airspeed going at a soft dynamic. We don't have the air that we need to accommodate for. So I'm going to angle my air a bit more up, push my bottom lip forward. I'm going to bring the camera closer again so you can maybe see it a little closer. hope you were able to see a difference there. Now let's talk about the low register, because the tough thing about the low register is it is very difficult to play low and loud. We need a lot of slow air moving through the instrument. That means we need to accommodate for it. We need to aim down. And there's a lot of ways we can create space with our embouchure, aperture, and in our body and all of those things to make sure that that air is slow enough. But what about when we have to play soft and low? I think a lot of times we fall into this trap of being able to play with a juicy low register, and then we get carried away. So all of our low notes sound really big and juicy, even if they're marked piano. This I see a lot in college students who get that big low register and then they always just kind of lean into it. When I feel like we can play with a lot more finesse, a lot more color when we're able to control the color of that low register. And how do we do that? We do that a lot with the angle of our air. I know that we can also create different colors with different vowel shapes, but that is for a different episode. So in the recapitulation section of Reinecke's Ballade for Flute and Piano, there's this beautiful reiteration of the melody in the low register, and it comes back in its forte, and it is a really big, juicy moment. And that's what I'm going to use as an example here. In the low register, big open sound, angling my air down. Now, if I were to want to play that passage soft, but had the same setup, but used less air, it would sound like this. Meaning I don't change the angle. Then I feel like I collapse here. So if you're playing low notes and you feel like you're collapsing here, I think your aperture is a little bit too big here. Your angle might be a little bit too low. Something like that. Now I need to be more specific, aim my aperture a little bit more, maybe straight across than down. And I want to make sure that I'm more specific with my aperture. So instead of, we're going from loud to that same angle. Sounds a little fuzzy and not centered. To a lot more specific, I'm aiming up a little bit more, and that is really the key to a more focused but still soft timbre in the low register. So, how I would practice this is find extreme dynamic moments just like the ones I just did, right? So maybe you're working on the Chaminade Concertino and you play the opening. Play it at forte. Get that really centered. Experiment with the angles. Maybe I'll aim a little bit more up with my angle as I play loud. That sounded a lot more fuzzy, didn't it? Now, even more down. That got a lot of edge in the sound, maybe a little bit too much for my taste. For me, that's a sweet spot. Now, you can do that with any piece of music. I like to do this exercise with repertoire instead of etudes because I feel like I know kind of how I want it to sound, because I can use amazing recordings to listen to of these incredible flutists to help guide my ear. So I would recommend listening to a recording of people and then trying to imitate their sound and use the angle of the air to kind of help you experiment. All of this is just for the sake of experimentation. Now, one last thing. Make sure to investigate what each angle sounds like. Don't just do what you think sounds best and try to keep it there. It's important to know your limit. It is important to know as much what doesn't sound very good as what does. So you can know, oh, if it sounds a little fuzzy, my angle of my air is too high, I need to lower it. That's a really amazing tool to have in your toolbox. And all of these fundamental principles are so you can really explore those tools. That is how I would experiment with this. Let me know in the comments if you do this and what you think. There's a fly flying around in here, so if you saw that, consider yourself lucky. I don't know what that means, but if you see a fly in the video, you have good luck now. Try this out, see what happens, add this to your toolkit of things to troubleshoot with. I think fundamentals should really be explored in this way. We need to know how the flute works, how our angle interacts with the instrument, and what it's actually doing. Because then you can make progress so much more quickly, rather than just trying things and repeating and like, oh, it worked that time, but not this time, and I don't know why. That's so frustrating, and it can be so hard to investigate what's really going on. So input something into the instrument really intentionally. So input what you want, the angle specifically, whatever it is, very specifically into the instrument. Don't just wait to see what happens. Then you can learn, oh, that worked, that didn't work. Instead of just guessing, like, oh, that really worked. I wonder what that was. Who knows? Let's just keep going. That's not as productive as it could be, and you don't get to add to your toolbox as much.
Hey everyone, this is Chelsea from the future editing this video. I didn't do an outro, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. If you play the flute, I hope you subscribe to the channel. I love to talk about fundamentals of flute playing, and I hope to, engage with you in the comments. If you have any questions, please let me know. I do have a couple of openings in my online studio, so if you're interested in flute lessons, there's a link in the description to guide you to fill out an inquiry form, and I will see you next time to talk about flute technique.